Hi, everyone. This is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Today is December 2nd, 2021, and I wanted to make a video on DApps, basically to discuss a few things. As I mentioned, there's some workshops slash micro summits that are going to happen and some other minutia. First and foremost, let's talk about certification. So, as many of you are aware, one of our big passions is creating a way of differentiating dApps that have been certified from dApps that are uncertified. So, what is certification? And that's a really interesting question. And it can range everything from an auditor has checked it and filed a report and told you that it's been audited to some form of verification against a formal specification. So, there's a very broad range of definitions here. So within our own company, we have actually a pretty broad range of definitions. And what we're trying to do is aggregate down to four levels. So uncertified, level one, level two, level three. So what we're going to do is hold a micro summit, and we're going to bring together most of the people who are interested in discussing this. So those who are on the dApp side and actually want to get certified, those who are on the certification side, those who are on the formal methods side, the security auditing side. And the hope is that this workshop micro summit can basically write a candidate series of specifications for level one, level two, and level three. We've had some internal discussions with runtime verification through the Alpha Frontier program. We have some rough ideas of what we'd like to see for each of these levels. And then other vendors like Qvik, for example, have created even some automated tooling for the level one side. And we're right now writing formal semantics for Plutus and K to apply some of the ideas of their K framework to Cardano. Then on the Qvik, and then on the Certic side, they have some tooling that's in the Ethereum ecosystem that would be nice to port over. Now, why is this important? Every single day, you'll see something gets hacked. Every single day, you'll see, there's some security problems, some money that's lost, some trust issue. And so what we want to do is create a situation where you, the user of a Cardano application in any app store, can see in the metadata of the application what level of curation it's gone through and quality control it's gone through. And we want that to be as transparent of a process as possible. And we want that to be an open process. So it's not controlled by a company and it's not controlled by some app store. It's actually metadata that's put on chain. And then you can decide the root of trust of who you trust. And then you can adjust your GUI accordingly. So as you know, we're building for our Light Wallet, IO's Light Wallet that's coming to market next year, a dApp store. And in that dApp store, we have a particular opinion on how things are going to be visualized. And to get into that dApp store, there's no approval process. Instead, there's going to be a standard for embedding your app on the Cardano blockchain. So an app registration as transaction. And then every app that is registered, certified or uncertified, will be listed in that dApp store. They'll just be visualized differently. The ones that are uncertified, there's no information about the author or any of this stuff. They'll appear in a kind of a no man's land, an open area where everything's at. And that's just raw data on the chain. And then the certified things will appear in a different area, and there'll be a lot more metadata about them because that's been provided. And we'll have a root of trust from auditors that we work with. Longer term, what we're planning on doing is setting up a standards institute specifically for smart contract development on both the Ethereum side and on the Cardano side. Because as many of you are aware, Cardano supports both the EVM and Plutus. Plutus is ahead of the EVM, and there's going to be several months of building that out with the community as they deploy their applications. For example, all of you heard the news that Sunday Swap is doing its testnet December 5th. So that's an example of a Plutus native application that takes advantage of everything in Cardano. But the Mamba project is going to come out next year, and that'll give full Ethereum interoperability. So your Solidity code will work one-to-one on Cardano, just better, faster, cheaper. So we need certification standards for both Ethereum and for Plutus. And so those standards have to be implementation agnostic. So our hope is to create an institute that takes these candidate specifications and it handles both the certification and the accreditation. So standards for what can be certified and accreditation of those who certify. And likely we'll embed that in an academic body. We've had conversations with the University of Wyoming, and other universities, and eventually we'll make an announcement, and we'll set up an endowment similar to the endowment that I did at Carnegie Mellon University for the Center of Formal Mathematics. It's unrelated to crypto there, but that's an example of a custodial entity that's permanently endowed to fulfill a facility. In that case, the mechanization of math to a dependently typed language. And in this case, the standards of smart contracts crossed industry. And it'll be a members based organization that companies, individuals, and others can join. So that's an ongoing project that will be completed in 2022. We'll start it through the CIP process, the Cardano Improvement Proposal process, to begin with here in soon. And it gets kicked off with a workshop, which will write the first set of candidate SIPs, and then we'll use those for the first wave of dApps. And then we'll have an iterative agile cycle where we kind of learn, we see what's being done well, what isn't being done well. And then our hope is as we close out 2022, we get really good standards and processes and procedures for certifying applications. The way of registering a dApp on the Cardano blockchain means that you get guaranteed listing regardless if you have any commercial relationship with dApp stores that follow that standard. And because you have a certification audit trail, a lot of things can follow through because the state of these things can be preserved with the Cardano blockchain. So this is something we're going to co-build as a community together all throughout next year. And hopefully we can create a significantly better experience for everyone involved, not just developers, but also the users. And also we can get to a point where you have high assurance levels if there's something that's commercially critical. For example, once these certification levels exist, one of the things I'd like to do is to have a frank conversation with people in the Catalyst community and try to make it a common theme that if somebody receives funding for Catalyst, they commit to getting their application certified at least at one of those levels, level 1, 2, and 3, to give the community some oversight over the quality of the code that's being produced so that we don't end up having in our ecosystem $10.5 billion lost, unlike other ecosystems that don't seem to care too much and hide behind decentralization as an excuse for poor quality. Now, I do get asked on a regular time about when does this dApp come out? When does this dApp come out? I still get criticized from time to time about issues for other pieces of software like Yoroi. It's important for the community to understand that Cardano is big and there are many people. If you go to cardanocube.io, you can see the ecosystem map. There's well over 100 applications that are in the process of building and launching on Cardano. And they're public. You can see them. You can click on them. You can go to their websites. You can see the teams. And we don't have a commercial relationship with those entities, the vast majority of them. And where we do, it's usually around us helping because we'd like to make sure that the code that they're deploying is okay. Or perhaps it's a small equity position through the C fund. But in any event, because we are not in a command and control position for that infrastructure that's being deployed, we don't know the dates. No one tells us. So if you come to me on Twitter and say, when does Sunday Swap launch? We don't know. They'll come to us with questions from time to time, and we co-develop some things like we helped them out a little bit with concurrency and memory utilization and space so they can have a more efficient contract. And we extend that to other DEXs as well, because we really want to make sure that that first wave have great pedagogical value, meaning that they can be used as references to teach people how to build things in the extended UTXO model. But just because we occasionally help out with that doesn't mean we're given any additional information about when is something going to launch and what does that mean. Okay, that's that team's business. Asking me over Twitter, asking our people over support channels or forums, it doesn't really get anywhere. It doesn't really do anything. That said, we've seen enormous progress, and there already are smart contracts and dApps running on Cardano today. It's important to understand that. There's even a small DEX that we're trying to look into a bit and get a better understanding of that seems to be trading on Cardano today. So they're here, and they're definitely growing very quickly. And things, for example, I get asked a lot, like when PAB? Well, we have the PAB, it's running. And as I told everybody, this is not a light switch like this date happens, the PAB's out, and then all these dApps suddenly turn on. You use the PAB as part of your application construction and deployment. So just because the component is available doesn't translate to that component then infers the dApp is ready today. Any more so than having JDK8 gives you suddenly every Java application turns on. Or having the latest version of the Google Development Kit for Android, somehow that means your Android application. You have to use the tooling to construct an application. So what's happening right now with Sunday Swap and Meld and all these other Cardano native ventures is they are using the testnet version of the PAB to construct software. And they're testing and deploying that for the most part to the testnet, which is a very sensible thing to do. And what's happening is the Plutus pioneers, the communities, the development companies that we've brought in, and others are looking at that, commenting on that, learning from that. And it's a commercial decision, a quality decision, a user experience decision for when they feel comfortable to take it from the testnet to the mainnet. Now, these are ventures and they want customers. They want to commercially succeed. They want to grow. It's business like anything else. So they all operate on different timelines. And some are very fast, as the ones who've already deployed on Cardano, mainnet applications today, running today. And other ones are kind of in a more cautious setting because they anticipate a high volume. And that's the spectrum that we have. Now, our belief is that throughout the rest of the year and all of Q1, you're going to see a lot of points of light turning on. So almost certainly we'll see at least one or more DEXs, because we already have one. So by definition, the statement's tautological. We will have DEXs online for Christmas, and more DEXs will turn on. And it's these DEXs' decision when they feel it's a good time to do that and when they've crossed that threshold. Now, there are some requested functionalities and capabilities for the PAB. There are other things, SIPs to implement, like SIP 30 and so forth. And different pieces of infrastructure have different things. NAMI wallet's in a different state than Yoroi, in a different state than Daedalus. And that infrastructure evolving at a rapid rate. We're actually developing thousands of commits per week. And every team is working in parallel, some in the IO family, some outside of the IO family, some we don't even talk to. We don't know anything about. They just seem to be building things and releasing things. And welcome to a decentralized ecosystem. So it's a very exciting time and it's a very wild time, but it's important to over communicate sometimes, because the issue is that we are living in an age of very dishonest crypto media, and we're living in an age of incredibly bad social media. And many times it makes us believe that some of the social media we see is actually bots and paid trolls. So every single incident, big or small, eToro deciding that they're going to limit U.S. participation, is adapt not implementing something correctly and they don't have concurrency, whatever happens to be, becomes the narrative to the dishonest crypto media and to these people over Twitter and other places. And it carries through, and people just sometimes fall victim to it and believe it. And that's why it's so important to understand this is a big ecosystem. There's going to be successes. There's going to be failures. Just like Ethereum is a big ecosystem, Bitcoin is a big ecosystem. And you can choose to focus on the DAO with Ethereum or Mt. Gox with Bitcoin and believe that's the standard. Or you can realize that the failure or success of these things has no bearing on the overall picture of the quality of the platform. The point of the certification program, these other things, is to try to introduce some community curated standards and ways for people to kind of visually differentiate quality from one vendor to another and show the level of commitment the team has to quality. It takes time for that standard to evolve. And even if that standard exists, it's entirely possible that a level 3 certified great application could actually have a lurking protocol design flaw in it. It's also important to understand this living technology. Things change all the time. For example, one of the hallmarks of our proof of stake research agenda wasn't just building a great consensus protocol. We co-designed a new network protocol with the consensus protocol. We couldn't just take secure Kademlia off the table. A lot of people ask why. And internally, we understood because there is very significant DDoS attacks and Eclipse attacks and asymmetry resource attacks and other things that can be done with proof of stake that proof of work doesn't suffer from. And so there's a lovely paper that was written out of Stanford and MIT by David G. and Li Yang and his co-authors And the paper actually it's called Securing Proof of Stake Nakamoto Consensus Under Bandwidth Constraint. And it talks about some of those challenges and proposes a completely new way of doing things called download towards the freshest block. And they actually even talk about Cardano in here. Uh, and we heuristically designed some of the things that they think need to be formalized. That's just one example of the nuances and the incredible difficulty in these new systems. If you gain something, massive energy efficiency, you potentially have to do a lot of work not to give up something else. And so at the protocol level, the developer level, the infrastructure level, things are lively and changing. And we do our best working with the community as an ecosystem to try to figure out how do we make sure the changes are managed in an orderly way. Because there, on one hand, is a demand for functionality and features. On the other hand, there's a demand for stability and quality. One of the downsides of getting dApps on our platform is that means it's actually going to be harder to change the Plutus language in the infrastructure because everything that you'd want to do to change those languages may break old dApps, or you have to introduce versioning systems and so forth. It's a little easier with Cardano because we future-proof things with the hard fork combinator, so that you can do versioning through that kind of notion, and things are built in a very pure way. So it is a little easier to introduce these changes, and they can be done 3 times a year under the time schedule that we have. But you do have to understand that as more adoption increases, there's going to be a harder effort of coordination for this ecosystem. So it's always a balance between speed of delivery and a balance between feature richness and developer accessibility and utility of the underlying platform. I think this is where we're strongest because of design decisions that we made. And I think because of the governance system of Cardano, you're going to really see us separate from the pack with Ethereum and Bitcoin. If you look at Ethereum and Bitcoin, they've managed to achieve huge network effects, but because of achieving those network effects, change is extremely slow. Bitcoin only recently activated Taproot to catch up to some of the functionality and expressiveness that we enjoy in Cardano and in Ethereum. Ethereum is trying desperately to get to proof of stake, and it's going to take a while for them. It's not a criticism, it's a reality that they've had to face as an ecosystem because of their size and scale and because of the difficulty of the problem. The fact that we're able to do 3 major upgrades per year and we're building out this beautiful corpus of decentralized governance in a proper open source program really tells you how much further along we are. And that gives us the ability to execute much faster than our competitors. But again, dishonest crypto media, Fudstorm, other people, they come in and they try to make the opposite true. Extended UTXO is actually the most concurrent accounting system you can have because most of your state is local, not global. So you can off-chain things very easily, and you can put things in side chains very easily, and you don't have to care too much about the global state of the system. Accounts are significantly less scalable. Yet the narrative amongst a lot of Ethereum Solidity developers is Cardano can only do 1 transaction per block. And as we see these DEXs come online, the testnet Sunday swap, for example, it's an actual counterexample to that. They can do far more. And as the system scales and expands, far, far more. It's massively concurrent. But that's the lie. And it's the same when we talk about software quality. The design decisions that we made means that over the long run, 5 years, 10 years, it will be significantly easier to ensure quality dApps on Cardano versus Ethereum or other imperative language-based systems. But the lie told will be the opposite. So this is where we're at. And we as a community have to stay very vigilant. And we as a community have to be very forceful in correcting people who lie and hold them accountable to these things. And we do it with facts. We do it with papers. We do it with evidence, not personal attacks, but evidence along the way. When people ask, why is proof of stake so hard? You can listen to Molten Tar Monsters on YouTube say everybody's done proof of stake and it's easy, or you can read papers out of Stanford and MIT that actually talk about why it's so hard to build a proper proof of stake protocol and how it hasn't been completely perfected as an industry, despite the fact that there's more than 100 scientists working now for 6 years on this problem across 15 different institutions. And it turns out the furthest along in solving this problem is Cardano. Why? Because we're the most cited, the most mentioned, and the most analyzed of all systems amongst academics independent of our organization and engineers. Ouroboros has been implemented now in multiple cryptocurrency protocols. some that we have relationships with, some that we're competitors with. That's just a fact, and that's just a reality. But unfortunately, that reality is buried under a social media narrative from time to time. And the issue here is that when we look to dApps as they come online with Cardano, that narrative, unfortunately, is going to be subject to the same conditions that we've witnessed historically. So in the case of dApps, we're going to get enormous amounts of misinformation. We're going to get an enormous amount of FUD and other things. And it's important that you do your own research. It's important that you don't get immediately taken into it. And this is not just on the negative side, but also on the positive side. People will make claims about the dApps that they build on Cardano that are not true. So you have to hold the dApp developers to the same standards that you hold us to. Evidence-based software development, evidence-based data. Show the evidence. Show the paper trail. Show the work. Show the code. Never trust anybody. If they say it's secure, what evidence do you have that it's secure? If they say it's performant, show us the performance data. All of these things. This is a completely new economy that we're constructing together. So it's extremely important that we work together to produce that new economy in a safe way. And what's nice is that it's a game of keeping your gains, not a game of getting gains as quickly as possible. I would much rather live in an ecosystem that starts with 1 million users and grows to 2 or 3 million over a period of a few years than live in an ecosystem that goes from 1 million users to 300 million users down to 10 million users. Because an ecosystem that keeps its gains, even if it takes 10 years to grow, by the time it gets to 50 to 100 million, it's an extremely strong ecosystem. It has a low churn rate. Customer acquisition costs to continue to go down, and the quality of collaboration is up. We've seen a lot of things like MySpace and Farmville and others that had amazing customer acquisition, and they died very quickly. We've seen other things die quickly under poor custodianship, like, for example, Skype. So it's very important that we as an ecosystem understand where our growth comes from and understand our root principles as an ecosystem, which has always been evidence-based software development. And those standards must be applied to the dApp set. The good news is the wave of ventures that are coming, for the most part, the ones we've interacted with, have been very optimistic and open to having other people check their work, collaborate, share information, get certified, produce peer-reviewed research. And that's really exciting because that means that we can expect an extension of that quality. But because it's an open ecosystem, because it's permissionless, because it's decentralized, not every single person is going to subscribe to that philosophy. And that means you'll have a lot of move fast and break things people who will do things very quickly. And perhaps those things work, but perhaps they don't. And that's why $10.5 billion has been lost or stolen this year in the DeFi space. And we have to accept that some of that will occur on Cardano. And again, because of dishonest crypto media, because of social media behaving the way it is, those failures, there will be an attempt to define our platform that way. That's just the world we live in. It's just what happens. We cannot let that demoralize us or dissuade us. And we as an ecosystem have to have the ability to fight back with facts and evidence of our own and show the real USPs of the things that we do. From our part, IO is getting prepared to try to help carry some of the burden of marketing. It's actually not in our contract. It's not something we're responsible for doing, but we feel a moral obligation to ensure things are properly communicated. So we're hiring 7 full-time marketing people specifically to handle the community and dApp ecosystem. We would like to see the Cardano Foundation do the same. And we're going to have a lot of meetings with them next week about Cardano, the open source project. And hopefully we can get a really strong plan for marketing and community management done. Those 7 people will report to Tim Harrison. They'll work with Ben O'Hannon and Adam, the chief marketing officer of IO. And I will also directly communicate with them. And we'll talk about everything from timely distribution of information, infographic production, getting onto platforms like Instagram and TikTok, getting information in small form because we don't do so well there. We do really well in the long form communication. like long AMAs, long podcasts, these things, but short form shareables in that 1 to 2 minutes, and make sure we do a better job at managing narratives, especially when narratives are frankly completely out of control. eToro in particular was a very disgusting thing. I saw so many people come to Twitter inferring that somehow that means that we're the next Ripple, which is a total lie. Neither us or the Cardano Foundation have ever been contacted by a US regulatory body on any topic. We haven't even been invited to comment on Senate hearings. We have absolutely no issues in that domain. We've never had any issues in that domain. And it was just bizarre that people implied that a particular entity that's outside of the United States deciding to de-risk themselves as they pursue an S1 apparently is an indication that there's some event coming. Even though US banks and exchanges hold ADA, Bitstamp had just listed us. But that narrative persisted to a point that when we had a Cardano booth at an NFT conference down in Miami, about 1 out of 3 people came up and asked about eToro. It was a strange thing. Also, we were never told by anyone at eToro that that was occurring and given any heads up so that we could proactively figure out a way of handling the media of it. They just decided to do it the day before Thanksgiving when everybody was on vacation. I don't know why an organization would choose to do something like that, but they did. Yet still, ADA was never delisted, which shows you the negative narrative in the lies that are told. It was ring fenced in the US participation, but more than 100 markets still trade, and they still have stake pools. And that's going to continue beyond the end of the year. That liquidity will still be there beyond the end of the year for the vast majority of the users of the platform. Yet the headlines that we saw were delisted, as if it's a trend that will continue. So it's a strange thing, and this is just the reality that we live with, and how DApps apparently work, and our industry apparently works. Very short attention span, addicted to dopamine, and plays fast and loose with the facts and evidence. And I'd like to believe that Cardano as a project is very unique and that we hold ourselves to a higher standard. And I hold the community to that standard as well. So as we fight back, let's try to be as evidence-based as possible. We have to be a little bit better at distributing evidence. And we have to also understand we're not going to win every fight. There are already a lot of people in the cryptocurrency ecosystem who have made up their minds negatively or positively about Cardano, to the extent that they're absolutely unwilling to see or hear any evidence to the contrary of what they've decided. It's their loss. It's okay. The space is still quite small, and we have a lot of people to win over and grow outside of the industry. As we bring tens of millions of people on board in the developing and developed world, that'll be the priority. And I'm sure that normal people who don't live in crypto land and are obsessed with memes and fast money probably will be a bit more amenable to a slow and steady, systematic, honest, transparent project instead of a move fast and break things, have to act now or else you lose everything and get out in 6 months because it'll all be gone in 6 months mentality. Most people believe you have to work hard to actually accomplish great things, and you don't get something for nothing. And I question the wisdom of trying to attract people who believe otherwise. Doesn't seem like a healthy ecosystem to me. So just a bit about dApps, a bit about where we're at as an ecosystem, a bit about where the media is at. As I said, we're going to hire 7 full-time people at IO. We have pretty good ideas of what they're going to do, who they're going to report to, how they're going to work. And we're going to be very aggressive at trying to make sure an evidence-based narrative is presented, and very aggressive about trying to make sure that an accurate narrative is presented about events as they occur. We encourage the foundation to do the same, and we'll see. And I fully expect with their extended budget that they will do so. And we encourage Emergo to do the same. And we encourage all projects who are building on Cardano to make sure that they also include some money for product marketing and campaign marketing. And we love coordinate with people where and when it makes sense to ensure that people get as much exposure as possible. It's a very exciting time. It really is. I mean, there are so many people to work with and help. We have so many channels because of the Africa tour and the work we've done throughout Africa the last 4 years to start deploying RealFi across the entire industry. And as a final point, people often ask, how will you get all these high TVL DeFi applications to migrate over to Cardano? And I think first, organic growth will make a lot of them unnecessary, and others are going to be facing a lot of regulatory scrutiny. I fully expect to see lots of Wells notices coming down next year. There's a lot of people mentioning things like Reeves test. It's an unusual one. We usually hear Howie, but that tells me that there's probably a mindset amongst regulators that a lot of these yield producing DeFi applications will be captured under the regulation of some body within the United States and are unregistered and need to register. Although it's not clear how they would do that, I expect lawsuits to come next year. So there's going to be a demand for figuring out how to do DeFi differently in three different directions. One, consumer protections are needed, and those consumer protections are about form, function, and quality. That means certification is not a nice to have thing, but it's a must have thing in order to protect people. Two, there's probably going to be some demand for compliance with the business traffic that is occurring. Now, from our side, because we built Prism, we actually have a humongous leg up, meaning that you can embed DIDs into transactions, and you could do this in a private way. As a consequence of that work, for better or worse, it seems like we actually have a direct line of sight to a much better compliant notion of a DApp without necessarily centralizing it. And then finally, there's a desire for governance. Almost every DeFi provider is trying to figure out desperately how to DAOify, for lack of a better term, their applications so that the custodial organizations are no longer required for the operation of the application because they want to be the D in DeFi, decentralized. Well, Cardano also has a built-in advantage for that. And that advantage is that the tools we are building for Catalyst will eventually work for all native assets issued on Cardano. By the way, for those who call us a ghost chain, I will remind you there are over 2 million assets that have been issued on Cardano, mostly NFTs, but over 2 million have been issued. We had one in May, 2 million today in less than a year. And that's going to grow exponentially. Technically speaking, once Catalyst is done, each and every one of those assets will have access to the same voting tools and systems that Cardano itself has, which means every single app, if they so choose, can use our governance tools to fully decentralize. So I think these three things, certification, which we have a huge lead on, identity, which we have a huge lead on, and governance, which we have a huge lead on, will provide a very compelling argument for migration to Cardano for DeFi, above and beyond the fact that we have real customers, not people chasing yields who have no loyalty and leave the minute that they go down 1% to the latest flavor of the week, but marketplaces where people need microfinance, marketplaces where people need insurance, where they need peer-to-peer banking, because simply there's no alternative. And these are huge markets. MFI alone, microfinance alone in Kenya, is a $19 billion a year industry. Talk about yields, the average rates are 50 to 80% interest. There's innovations that we've seen with partners of ours, like Possessia, that lower those interest rates to 36% and the default rate from 40% to 2%. These are very attractive vehicles, and these are the kinds of things that I think are perfect for the real Fi revolution. And if they can be built safely, if they can use the right tooling and the right infrastructure can be put into place, I think all parties involved will be incredibly happy, and the increased liquidity will fundamentally transform the lives of hundreds of millions of people throughout Africa and other jurisdictions. That's the dream. And it's right there. It's in striking distance. We have the tools, we have the infrastructure, smart contracts are here, they're running, and all of these programs are underway. And there are literally thousands of people in the core project and millions of people in the project in general who are waking up every day either excited, contributing to, or directly connected to this success with all the capital necessary to get this done one way or the other. So we're there. It's about time the world recognizes it. It's about time real fact-based, evidence-based narratives get out instead of the constant FUD and lies that we seem to be exposed to and unfair treatment we seem to get. And we shall transcend and we shall persevere. To those who say it doesn't matter, I will remind you that sometimes in society, facts don't matter and perception of them does. And that's why you get certain presidents. That's why you get certain realities. That's why you get certain power structures. And I do not want to have built so much, seen so much, and have it fail not because of the merits of the program, but because people lied about it and it caused someone else to become the standard who doesn't have the same integrity. That would be the worst possible scenario. So 2022 is going to be our biggest year by far. 2021 was definitely our biggest year. We accomplished an enormous amount this year. We grew an enormous amount this year in every measurable metric you could look at. And I fully expect to continue to see that growth in every measurable metric in 2022. We're fully committed. We're here. We're fired up. We're ready to go. We're ready to win. And I know you are too. So have a wonderful December. I'll see you guys soon. Cheers.